Doesn't have to be a completely clean recording. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to our Seed to Harvest online lessons. Today we are going to be talking about the root systems, and we're going to be planting some root vegetables. So we always kind of start off in the same place, which is talking about the plant parts. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So if anybody wants to chime in, just go ahead and unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'll kind of move through it pretty quickly. But when we're looking at the plant, we always start a plant in the same way. So does anybody know? And shout it out if you know, otherwise I'll just go ahead and keep going. Let me know, where does a plant start? What do you need in order to have a new plant? Does anybody know? So typically what we're doing is we are going to plant something in the ground, all right? And this is our seed.
Yourself up here.
And what we learned about in the All About a Seed lesson is there are different things in the seed. There's 3 different parts to the seed. And the most important thing to know is that there is a little baby plant inside every seed, which is called our embryo. Okay. And once we give that seed the things that it needs, it will start to grow. So the first part of the plant that starts to grow is the roots, which go down into the ground. And we're going to talk more about the roots in just a moment. Okay. Once the plant is able to start getting energy and make its own food, get some nutrients from the soil, it's going to start growing towards the surface of the soil. And so it keeps its leaves pressed together, and it's going to start growing up to the soil. Then as it breaks through the surface, it's going to open up that first set of leaves so that it's able to start collecting the sunlight. So the job of our leaves is to collect sunlight in order to use the energy to make food for the plant. And that is, it's also going to sometimes collect some moisture as well, okay? Now this part here, this long part that was growing initially and is going to start growing even more, this is called the stem. And the stem has a couple roles. Its first job is to keep the plant either upright, or in the case of a vine, it's going to help the plant climb. And it's trying to make sure that the plant is facing and is positioned in such a way that it is able to be pointing towards the sun. So whether it's keeping it up straight, or if it's kind of creeping along up a fence or a different lattice, it's going to keep it facing towards the sun. And that way the leaves that it is growing are going to be able to do their jobs and collect more sunlight. So I'm going to go ahead and give our plant some more leaves. And as our plant gets bigger and stronger and it's making more energy, it's going to have the nutrients it needs to be able to start producing the next part of our plant, which is, if anybody wants to pipe in and let us know what the next part of the plant is, feel free. But the next part of our plant looks something like this. Okay. So this is, anybody want to say? All right. So this is the flower. And in the end, ultimately, the job of the flower is to make more seeds, okay? And it's going to do it in a couple different ways. Some flowers, they grow the seeds right in the center of the flower. This is after they've been pollinated. We're not going to talk about pollination today, though. So sometimes the seeds grow right in the center of the flower. Sometimes the flower, the petals will dry up and fall off, and then instead it starts to grow what becomes a fruit. And our fruit has the seeds inside of it. There are some fruit that have the seeds on the outside, which are our berries. But in this case, most times the fruit is contained, the seeds are contained inside of the fruit. So the real job for the fruit is not to nourish us, although it's the byproduct where the plants try to make the fruit as attractive and tasty as possible, not necessarily so that humans will come and eat them, but that animals might come along, eat the berries, knock them off the plant, or maybe in the case of like rabbits will eat them. They won't completely digest it, and then they will leave droppings along the ground, and those droppings have seeds in them. So having the fruit is going to help the plant get the seeds down to the ground. Whereas when plants grow the seeds on the flower, those seeds may just fall out onto the ground. Birds may come and try to eat the seeds, and they're messy and they'll get it all over the ground. And then some seeds are going to have little parachutes, and the wind is going to carry them, and then that will get them down into the ground. But ultimately, whether the seeds grow on the flower or if they grow in the fruit, the goal is eventually to get the seeds to the ground so that a new plant can grow, okay? So I said that we would go back to where we began, which is the roots, okay? So the roots have a couple jobs. The job that everybody knows mostly is that the roots are trying to get the nutrients for the plant. So they're going to be absorbing the water that's in the ground. They're also going to absorb some of the nutrients that are in the ground, and they're going to provide that to the rest of the plant. So the nutrients will come in, it's going to travel through the stem to all the parts of the plant that need it. The energy from the sun is going to allow it to take those, the water and the nutrients, the air, and make it into food for the plant. So the roots are helping to produce the food for the plant. The other job that the root has is it's creating stability for the plant. It's anchoring it into the ground, okay? So I have an example of a plant here. I just happened to pull this weed out of the ground in my yard. And if I pull this plant out of the ground, you can't even see the roots. And the reason for that is the roots are holding on to the soil. And so therefore, if the wind is blowing, like we had a really bad windstorm the other day, this plant didn't blow over and it didn't blow away in the storm because the roots were holding it in place and were grabbing onto the soil, okay? So the roots are really important for the stability of the plant and keep it rooted or anchored into the ground, okay? So if you guys have any questions at any time, or if you want to answer any questions that I'm asking, feel free to unmute yourselves, all right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the different types of roots, all right? So if I were a flower, okay, if I have a flower, and I'm gonna go ahead and point this down a little bit, this is my flower, okay? Now at school, I don't know if you guys remember, but we had these really giant blue foam pieces, kind of like this. And so I would use those to demonstrate this, but we're not at school and they wouldn't let me take them home. So we're working with wooden pieces today, our Tinker Toys. Okay, so if this is my flower and I want to grow and I want to live and be successful and have seeds and make other plants, I am gonna have my roots, which is this purple part. I've got my stem, and right now I have a flower, okay? I didn't have enough Tinker Toys to make leaves. So if I'm growing, can my flower just sit its root right on top of the ground and stay up? No, what happens? Well, what happens is exactly what just happened here, and I have to go grab it because it fell in the direction I didn't want it to fall in. All right, so if we just put the root and have the plant grow right on top of the ground, it's just gonna fall over. So what do we have to do with the root? Where do we have to put that root? Should we maybe put it deeper in the ground? So if we take our plant and we put it maybe in a little bit of soil, in this case, it's still gonna fall over, okay? So what direction? You can point with your finger if you're on the camera, or you can take yourself off mute and tell me which direction should we maybe put the root? If it's not staying up with just a little bit of soil, yep, maybe we should put it down deeper in the soil, okay? So I'm gonna add some more soil. Oh, still falls over. And I'm gonna add a little bit more soil. Now it stays up, right? So that's great. So this first type of root growth, where it's going to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the ground in order to keep it upright, that is called a tap root. All right. So our tap root is going to grow. When it's growing, we're going to have our plant up here. And our root is going to grow deep into the ground, all right? And that is how it's going to keep itself upright. There is another type of root system, all right? If we are growing this root, if this root is growing deep into the ground, do you think, what if I don't have that much soil? What if the soil is not deep enough for me to go straight into the ground? Some plants grow where there's only a little bit of soil. If we can't go down deep into the ground, what direction do you think we might be able to grow the roots for some plants? Maybe across, crisscross, okay? Let's see. If we go ahead and grab some more roots here, I am going to take them and I'm going to grow them out to the sides. All right, so they're going to keep pointing out. Now I only have one little bit of soil here. Before, when I tried to grow just straight into the soil, it did not stand up. Do you think this will stand up?
No.
Maybe? Let's see. There we go. So what's happening is the roots are growing off to the side and it's providing stability and holding it up without having the root to have to go down deep into the ground, okay? So this type of root system is called a fibrous root system.
I can't see myself.
All right, and so that is very similar to my weed here. My weed, I'm gonna get dirt all over the place here. My weed, hold on. I'm gonna get a little container so that way I don't make a huge mess. If I break away at the soil on my plant here so that we can see the roots, you can see that the roots are thin and they're going in all different directions in order to grab on like a hand onto the soil, okay? So we have all different roots coming around, all right? So that's an example of a fibrous root system. And when we draw it, we have our plant on top of the soil.
What does fibrous mean?
And then underneath the ground, if we look at it, we have lots of roots going in all different directions. They're all connected and they don't go as deep as the taproot, but they go out to the sides so that they're able to grab onto the soil, okay? Now, can anybody, an example of a fibrous root, in this case, it's this weed, okay? A lot of flowers like marigolds, actually maybe not marigolds, but our, let's see, lots of the pretty ones, some of our daisies, some of our sunflowers, they have more of a fibrous root system. An example of a taproot, can anybody guess? So once these plants, some plants live only for 1 year, some plants live for multiple years. And in order to live through the winter, they have to store food. So some plants are going to store food around their root systems, okay? Can anybody guess, based on where the food is being stored for this, what type of plant this might be?
A weed.
Does that look like that?
Carrot.
That is a carrot. So a carrot is a taproot vegetable or plant.
Carrot.
So this orange part of the plant, of the vegetable, is actually part of the root system. If you look closely, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it with my camera, I'm going to hold it up. Do you see those little hairs
Yes.
that are on the carrot? See all those little hairs coming out to the sides?
Mm-hmm.
Those are little pieces of the root that are coming from that main tap root and then going off to the side. So you have the one root that goes down the middle, and then you have little roots that are going off to the sides. Okay? So this, inside this carrot, there is actually that one central tap root. And if you took, I'm going to take one of these larger ones. Here we go. Here's my knife. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut through one of these carrots. And what you can see, if you can get the lighting right here, is you see that circle in the middle?
Yes.
The darker circle? Right through the center of that. The darker part is not the actual root, but right in the center of it, right there, is where that root is going to come through the middle. Okay?
Oh,
so what you guys can do, obviously you guys can't do a full investigation of different taproot plants because we're not in the classroom, but you can ask your parents and see if they have any root vegetables that you can look at and observe at home. I also have a big bunch of beets here. You can actually plainly see that taproot coming out the bottom. See these little things coming out the bottom? So that's the taproot. It also has the little hairs on it, but you can plainly see how deep into the ground that root is going, okay? And then another root vegetable, which I don't have the tops on these, but this is a radish. And you can see on the bottom where that root was coming out, okay? And radishes are kind of cool. If you have any at home, you can cut them in half because you can see the hole where that root is coming through, right in the middle of the radish, okay? All right, so we've looked at our plants, and again, ask your parents first, because I don't want you guys going out into your parents' garden and pulling up all of their really nice flowers. But if your parents need help weeding, ask them if you can help, and then go out there, and as you pull the weeds out of the ground, you can look to see if they have a fibrous root system like this one, or if they have a taproot. Like if you have dandelions in your yard or in your garden, those are great examples of taproots, and they're usually really hard to pull out of the ground because they're rooted so deeply in the soil. Okay? All right. So the next thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is soil. Now, soil is sometimes a little boring, right? Do you think soil might be a little bit boring? Yeah, it's just dirt, right? But I wanted to talk to you guys about what dirt is, and I'm going to actually show you where I am making dirt right now. Okay? But first, let's just really quickly talk about what dirt is. So if any of you can unmute yourself, that would be great, because I would love to get your feedback as part of this. All right?
Are you unmuted?
So if you want to unmute and be part of the discussion, feel free. All right? So, dirt. My question to you is, what is dirt? What is dirt made out of? Does anybody know?
I do.
No? No guesses? Has anybody here, raise your hand, have you ever made dirt before? Has anybody here made dirt?
No.
No. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what dirt is then. So dirt is made up of...
Oh, yeah. We did compost.
Organic material. Do you guys, have you ever heard the word organic before? Maybe at the supermarket? Yeah. So organic means that it was either once living or came from something that was once living. Okay. So for example, leaves that fall off a tree in the fall, that is organic because it came from a tree. We have what we call scat, which is animal droppings from rabbits or animals in the forest. That is going to get composted in here, and that is organic. All right. We also have grass clippings. You have dead animals, dead bugs, All those things make up organic material, okay? Then a good part of the ground or the soil is going to be made up of air, water, we have to have moisture in the dirt, and then also some of those living creatures that I just mentioned. We have worms, we have bacteria, okay? We have fungus. So we have things that are still living. And these things right here, those help us to make the dirt because they take that organic material and they're going to break it down or compost it into tiny little bits, which make up the dark part of the soil, okay? So if I'm looking at dirt, so even just the dirt that I just took out of the ground, if you go outside and just take some dirt off, I see that I have living pieces of plants. I have, oh, we also have sometimes some rock that's in there as well, okay? Minerals and rocks. We have little pieces of branches. And then we have all of this fine dirt. And this is what is being broken down. That's all that organic material that was broken down and makes up our dirt. Okay, so I'm going to add rocks on here as well because rocks and minerals are a big part of it. That's where we get a lot of the nutrients. Okay, so I'm going to take you over really quickly and I'm going to show you how I'm making my own soil right now. Okay, you can see my messy garage. So here in my garage, I have this bin. And what this bin is, it's a worm bin. So inside this bin, I'm putting all of my scraps of food, all of my organic material, and I am letting our worms eat it, okay? So what I can do, and I didn't bring gloves, so I'm gonna get my hands a little messy here, but I can just dig through here. I go down and towards the bottom, and what I'll find is that my food is starting to be broken down into soil. And so this is what I'm going to be able to grow my plants in. And this is going to be really great because it's going to have lots of nutrients. And my worms, and maybe I can see, I don't know if you guys can see with the lighting in there, but I've got a big pile of worms here. And they are helping me with all of that breaking down of the food into soil. So I have over 500 worms in this bin, and they're helping to create that. I know, I see some reactions. What, 500 worms? But these worms, and you'll notice these worms are little. They're not as big as those worms that you see outside when it rains. These are called red wigglers, where the worms that you see outside, those are our earthworms or our night crawlers. And they help us as well, but these red wigglers chew through a lot of compost. So that's what we like in order to make the soil, okay? So when this soil is done, I'm gonna be able to use it to grow a lot of plants in our garden. And it's really great because it is nice and light and fluffy and has a lot of air in there and a lot of nutrients. All right, so give me 1 second. I just gotta clean all that gross stuff off my hand.
I'm getting all the way to the top.
Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk a little bit about how heavy the soil is, all right? So this soil right here and the soil that my worms are creating are very light and fluffy, right? So there's lots of air pockets in there. So if I go over here and I draw that out, do you guys know what it's called when things are either loosely packed or if they're really tightly packed together? Anyone? No? So what we call it, based on how tightly packed the particles of soil are, is we call that our soil density, okay? And our soil density is very important for our root systems because if you have soil that is really tightly packed together and it's really hard, it's going to be very difficult for our taproot vegetable to grow really deep. It's going to take a really long time for it to grow its root system. And so it might not be able to grow as quickly if the soil is very tightly packed together. Also, sometimes we said that part of the soil is made up of rocks. So if you have a carrot growing, and all of a sudden your carrot encounters a rock, do you know what that carrot's going to do? It can't grow through the rock. So therefore, it's going to have to either just stop there and it won't grow very well, or sometimes our carrots will grow around it. They will split their roots in two, and they will grow in two directions. Have you guys ever seen a carrot, when you pick it up, it looks like it's got legs? It's really kind of fun. It's a good experiment to do. If you guys ever plant carrots, plant your carrots right over a rock and then see what happens, okay? So that's what's going to happen. If it's too dense or if there's lots of rocks, then our plant is not going to grow appropriately, okay? If it's too loose, okay, if we don't have a lot of, if it's really loose and not very dense, our fibrous root systems are going to grow off to the sides, but it's going to be really hard for them to grab onto the soil. Because if you guys see this soil, if I pick it up and it's very loose, it's just going to fall right through my fingers. So my fibrous root system is not going to be able to get a really good hold on that soil if it's too loosely packed. So it needs to be harder and more closely packed for our fibrous root system, okay? So how dense the soil is going to be very important for how our root is able to grow and hold on to the soil. One other thing that is important with how dense the soil is how water is able to flow through the soil. When you have really loose soil, the water is going to flow down very quickly. And so for a fibrous root system, where it needs the water is where the roots are, which is closer to the surface of the soil. So if we don't have, if it's too loose and the water is going to drain too quickly, that's not going to be good for our fibrous root system. Over here for our carrots want the water to be down further. So if the soil is too tightly packed, the water is going to puddle and stay towards the top of the soil, which is not where our carrots or our taproots need it to be, okay? So we need to make sure that when we plant our plants, we know what type of root system they have and what type of soil that they need so we can make sure that they are successful. I love the faces, guys. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get planting. So I've actually been over to the garden a couple times at the school, and we already have, for the kindergarten, we have our peas and beans planted. We have some kale and radishes planted here in my garage greenhouse. And I actually planted 4 whole beds of strawberries this year. So hopefully when you guys get back and you're able to go to the school, there will be strawberries that you guys can go eat. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to plant some taproot vegetables. So we are going to plant our carrots and our beets. Now, if you want to plant at home, I know we usually do this in the classroom and everybody gets to plant something, but unfortunately we are not in the classroom. So I have these little kits that I can either drop off outside your houses or your parents can pick up outside my house. But if anybody wants to be able to plant carrots or beets at home, just ask your parents and just tell them to sign up and get a kit, and then you guys can do this at home, okay? So what we're gonna do is we are going to plant, and since we are not at the garden, we are gonna plant inside, and we are going to use these really tall bags because we want our tap roots to be able to grow down. So for example, if I took one of those carrots from before, I know that this carrot would definitely fit inside the bag. So I should be able to grow a complete carrot outside of the garden, okay? But in order to grow it, we need to make sure that we have what it needs. So the first thing that our carrot is going to need is soil. And this soil right now is very dry, okay? It just falls right apart. So we need to make sure that we add some water to our soil. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just pour a bunch of water in here. Okay. And this is where using a laptop gets a little tricky because you guys can't really see. So I'm gonna try to do this one-handed. This might not go well, we'll see. All right, so I'm just gonna get in there with my hands and I'm going to just move all of the dirt around. And what I'm looking for is that it's going to change color so it's a little bit darker and it sticks together, okay? We're looking for it to kind of clump together. We don't want it to just be too loose and fall right apart because then that's not going to give our root system the moisture that it needs. We don't want to drown our root vegetables, but we do want to make sure that it's moist because our, if you guys remember from kindergarten, in order for our seeds to start growing, they need to have water, soil, and warmth. So if we don't have a moist enough soil, then it's just not going to grow because that seed coat won't get softened and our little embryo won't be able to get the nutrients that it needs to start growing. Okay, so I think this is good. I'm gonna add more water later too, but at least we can get started. So I'm gonna put you guys back down. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just fill this bag, okay? So this is where I usually make a big mess. Good thing is that I think I see Miss McShane on this call, and now since I'm doing this in my garage and not her classroom, she doesn't have to clean up this mess after I'm done. So I guess there's a silver lining to everything. All right. So we're gonna get all of the dirt inside this bag. We're gonna pack it down a little bit, not too much, because remember our tap roots don't want really heavily packed soil. They want it to be a little bit looser. Then get the soil all the way to the top there. And so for this video, I'm not gonna make you guys watch me plant 3 different types of plants because that could get a little bit boring for you. It's pretty much all the same steps, just a different seed. So I'm just gonna show you what each of the seeds look like. I will plant these plants after the call, and then I will keep checking in. So if you guys check our website or check our YouTube channel while you're at home, I will keep posting updates as to how your plants for your class are growing. And I'm gonna plant some, look at that, I'm a mess. I'm gonna plant some in the garden as well. So I will give you updates. So even though you can't go to the school and look at it right now, hopefully you'll still be able to see how they're doing. And as they get to the period where they're ready to harvest, you guys will be able to go and see it for yourself, okay? So we are gonna be planting carrots. Now I have 2 different types of carrots. It's very hard to see. See how small, let me see if I can move it out of the way so you can see it in the light. See how small those carrot seeds are? They are super, super tiny. And it's really hard to pick them up and to see. So this year, I got what's called a pelted seed. It's kind of like an M&M for gardeners, meaning that they just took this seed and they put it inside a little coating that has nutrients for the plant. And the reason I do that is, 1, it makes it easier for the seed to germinate, but also it just makes it easier to plant because they're easier to pick up and plant one at a time rather than sprinkling whole bits of seeds. So this is the one I'm going to plant first. This one is called a Mokum carrot, and it only really gets to be about 3 or 4 inches tall when it's at full maturity, and it grows a lot faster than the long carrots. So these you can eat a lot faster. The other carrot I'm going to be planting for you guys is called a rainbow carrot. And these are great because they are all different colors. And it's fun because when you pick it, you never know what color you're going to get. So when you pull it out of the ground, it could be purple, it could be red, it could be orange, it could be yellow, it could be white. Never seen a blue carrot, but you never know. All right. And then the third thing that we are going to plant, these are called beets. And beets, their seeds are a little bit bigger naturally. And that's what I showed you before, which is that red vegetable with a leafy top. And beets are great. I love them. They're one of my favorite vegetables. They're very sweet when you roast them, okay? And you can also eat the leaves on top, almost like spinach. Okay, so these are great. So we're gonna plant those as well. But for right now, I am just going to plant the Mokum carrots. If you do get a grow kit bag and you guys grow some at home, there's a full instructional video on how to plant every single one of these, so you guys won't miss out and you'll know what you're doing, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put those seeds into my hand, make sure they don't roll off. And I'm gonna these don't get planted very deep at all. So when we were in kindergarten, we were planting our sunflower seeds, which were really big. So we planted them to the top of our, where our knuckle is, our first knuckle is. These are only gonna get planted like a teeny bit, so not even to the bottom of our nail, okay? So I'm just gonna make a little indentation in the soil, okay? Barely putting a hole in there. And I'm gonna make 2 of those, okay? Far apart from each other because I wanna give these carrots enough room to grow. So there we have our 2 little indentations. Then I'm just going to take our seeds, and luckily because the pelleting, you can see where they are, and I'm gonna place them in each of these indentations, okay? So I have our 2 little white seeds. And then I'm just gonna very carefully put a teeny bit of soil on top just so that it's covered, but it's not very deep in the soil, okay? Then I'm gonna go ahead and add water, because water is what's going to make these seeds germinate. Water is important to soften the seed coat, like I said, and then also once it starts to grow, it's going to allow the roots to absorb the water and nutrients out of the soil that it needs. And like I said, the third thing that it needs besides water and soil is warmth. So over in my little greenhouse area over here, you'll see that I already have some plants in there, and they are sitting on the left-hand side there. They are sitting on warming mats. So that is going to allow them to get the warmth that they need to start growing and to germinate, which is what it's called when a seed starts growing. So I'm gonna put this, I'm gonna actually first label it, and then I'm going to, here we go, my labels. I'm gonna label it, and then we're going to put it underneath the lights, so that way, and on the warming mat, so that way it'll start growing and we can start to see what our carrot is going to look like. So I'm just gonna write Mokum on here so that I know which one I planted, and then today's date, which is the 14th. So that way I know how long. These usually take anywhere from 7 to 14 days in order to germinate. So we may not see this plant start growing for 2 weeks. So I'll keep checking in and let you know how far along it is, okay? Now over here, I do have some plants that have already started to germinate. So our first lesson was the actually this one's the first grade. Our first grade planted kale and radishes. So those have started germinating. You can just barely see the plants coming above the soil. And in fact, these 2 were planted a little bit earlier. They're also kale and radishes, and you'll see that they've gotten a lot bigger, okay? So they're very, very small and spindly still, but you can see that they're coming above the ground. And then our biggest plant right now is our bean. So this was the one that the kindergarten planted, and it is above ground, and it had a little trouble with its leaves. It looks like its leaves got stuck at some point. So it looks like they're starting to get a little shriveled. So I'm gonna have to keep an eye on this guy, and I might need to plant another one if it doesn't survive. But I was over at the school yesterday, and we planted some sugar snap peas in the garden there, and they've just started coming up as well. So that hopefully they won't get eaten by anything, and those will grow, and you'll be able to snack on those as well. Okay.